What's up, guys? Chris Brown here from Train Boston, coming at you with another wellness moment. So, today I want to finish talking about the three macronutrients. We're going to top it off by talking about fat. So, fat, again, it's one of the primary macronutrients, and sometimes you hear fat referred to as a lipid. All right, it's 9 calories per gram. It's more than double what both carbohydrates and protein are. So, it's a very dense energy source. It's used for any long-term low energy usage, like if we're just sitting here talking right now, or if we're doing a nice easy walk down the street. Now, there are very many types of fats we have to learn about here. You'll hear about saturated and unsaturated fats specifically most of the time. Now, unsaturated fats, they're liquid at room temperature, and they most commonly come from plants and seafoods, also nuts and seeds, and varying carbohydrate-based sources. They're going to be very easy to break down comparative to saturated fats. Among those, there's mono and polyunsaturated fats. You're going to see monounsaturated fats, nuts, seeds, nuts and seed oils, avocados, that kind of thing, and polyunsaturated fats, omega-3 and omega-6 oils. You're going to see them highly in fish, especially deep sea fish with a lot more fat on them. You're going to see them in walnuts. You're going to see them in all kinds of sunflower seed products, chia seeds, flax seeds, etc., etc. We tend to get more omega-6 than omega-3, and that's a point we'll touch on again at the end of this talk. What we want to probably try to do is balance that out a little more. Among saturated fats, those tend to come from animal products and animals themselves. These are solid at room temperature. They take more effort and more time to break apart than the unsaturated fats. That's due to them having these long carbon chains that they're made up of. So it makes sense that something bigger would be harder and take longer to break apart. It doesn't inherently make them bad, it just makes them different. You may not have ever heard of any of these, but the most common type for us to have are stearic and palmitic acids. A less common one is called myristic acid. And then you got your medium chain triglycerides, lauric, capric, caprylic, and caproic acid. Those last few were actually named after Capricorn, which is an interesting side fact. So again, among these, you have different sizes of chains of saturated fats. So you got your short chain, your medium chain, and your long chain triglycerides. Okay, triglyceride means three pieces and then one glycerol. Okay. So your short chain ones you never hear about because they're produced in your gut through fermentation. You're not going to be eating those typically. And then your medium chain triglycerides you might hear from a supplement store like GNC or Vitamin Shop. Those are easily absorbed and transported, and they're metabolized directly at the liver. They're actually really easy to use. We can use them for energy, and they actually tend to be healthier for us because we're not going to be storing them as fat. And then there's your long chain triglycerides, and these are the most common in our diet. Again, the stearic and palmitic acid you're going to see a lot of in your animals and animal products. And they take the longest to break down and use. But they also have a lot of energy, so they're not necessarily bad for us. The last one we have to talk about real quick is trans fats. Most people have heard about trans fats. They're the evil, the bad fats. There are some naturally occurring trans fats that have been shown to not be bad for us. But the ones that we typically hear about are the ones that are artificial and created in factories, and they're likened to basically chemicals and just really bad for you, right? So I'm not going to refute that. They are actually really hard for us to break down, and they have the highest correlation to cardiovascular disease and plaque buildup in your arteries, otherwise known as atherosclerosis. So we want to stay away from those. When you read a food label, it can be hidden a little bit because they are legally allowed to write 0 grams of trans fats on it if they have 0.4 grams or less per serving. That means if you have more than one serving, you're going to get around a gram or so, which we really want to have as close to 0 as possible. So on the back of that label, under the ingredients list, look for partially hydrogenated oils. If it has that in it, you probably just want to stay away from it. Typically, although it's been made illegal in a lot of, if not all the states in America, I have to double check on that. They used to use that kind of oil to deep fry our French fries or Twinkies at the fairs. Generally, you want to stay away from those foods anyways. So where do we get our fats typically? Like I said, saturated fats mostly come from animals and animal products. Some saturated fats like lauric acid and the other medium chain triglycerides, they come from nuts like coconut oil or palm oil. Mono and polyunsaturated fats, they typically come from plants, nuts, seeds, nut and seed oils, and seafoods. Salmon's probably the most common one you hear. How do we use them? Well, while at rest or low intensity exercise, we're primarily using them for fuel. We break down fats in the bloodstream in a process called lipolysis. And this causes your fat cells to separate from the free fatty acids. Remember the 3 fatty acids and the glycerol, and then release them into your bloodstream. Our cholesterol, or our VLDLs and our LDLs, they transport these acid chains to your cells where they attach and deposit the acids. Then it's broken down into acetyl-CoA. You don't really need to worry about that, but that's where it's broken down into, and then it can go through the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle and be turned into ATP, which is energy. All right, so that's how our fat gets turned into energy. When we don't have glucose, our body can actually use fat to make ketones, which we can use for energy, produced in the liver. You may have heard of the keto diet. You may have heard of ketogenesis. Those are terms that are pretty popular nowadays. It's a little less efficient, but it will actually provide fuel for our body, and it works. So we can get by without carbohydrates. When we get excess dietary fat, of course, it will be stored as energy, just like carbohydrates will be stored as energy. And it will turn into adipose tissue, or that subcutaneous fat in our body. That does have use in our body, but we typically don't want to have so much of it, especially around our organs, which is a high correlation for cardiovascular disease, as well as other problems that we typically don't want. So, does fat make us fat? Does dietary fat make us fat? Well, like I said, just like too many carbs, especially the processed types, will make your body fat and unhealthy. So will fats, especially the processed types, right? With too many calories and too much of any one thing, your body's not able to regulate the hormones very well. Specifically, insulin and glucagon, which is blood sugar hormones, and then your ghrelin and leptin, which is your hunger and satiety hormones. If you have too much of something, your body doesn't really know what's going on. And so if your body doesn't know what's going on, you can just keep eating and eating and eating, and your body won't help you regulate your body fats. So if you have too much too often and you don't have something for your body to do with it, like repair muscle or restore muscle and liver glycogen after a workout, you'll probably get fat. So yes and no. But are fats bad for you in general? So most of the studies you've heard on saturated fats as a whole didn't look at each individual type of fat, and it didn't do a good job at looking at all the lifestyle factors on those people they studied. There's things that you need to know about the person's history of health. You need to know about their parents and everyone in their genetics. You need to know about whether they're exercising. You need to know the rest of their diet. The saturated fat they got, was that from processed terrible crap foods, or is it from lauric acid in coconuts? All these things matter highly, and these studies in the past didn't do a great job judging them. Most of what they took away was, cholesterol is bad for us. Cholesterol, those LDLs, the VLDLs, HDLs, this is what is causing this problem. Those are essentially what we're using for transport systems, and they are highly necessary for our body. So let's dig into that real quick. So cholesterol is actually a lipoprotein. It's a precursor of the steroid hormones. Okay, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, also vitamin D. So without cholesterol, all those super important sex hormones and vitamin D, they're not going to work. Okay, so it's a hydrophobic molecule, meaning it's afraid of water. So it needs to be contained in this spherical macromolecule in the plasma, or in the blood, essentially. And they call them lipoproteins, like I said. So when you see the acronyms LDL and HDL, that's what it stands for, is low density or high density lipoproteins. So what's the difference between LDL and HDL? Well, LDL means low density, meaning it's big. So most people get that confused. Low density means big because it's not dense like a fist. High density is smaller. So the high density, they move through easier. Low density, it moves through a little tougher and then more likely to stick to the walls, creating plaque. And that's why typically that's your bad cholesterol, as you're told. But there's also another type called VLDL, okay, and that's very low density, so they're even bigger, and those are extra dangerous, or at least that's the way they've been classified lately. And then you have your exogenous or outside or dietary cholesterol, which is coming from your foods like your animals and your animal products. And then you have your endogenous, which is produced by the liver on the inside. Okay, it's been heavily documented lately that eating foods with exogenous cholesterol, like eggs, for instance, don't increase our risk of cardiovascular disease or affect our lipoprotein profiles, the VLDL, LDL, HDL ratios. The older studies have not taken into account other factors, okay, like we said. And they're looking at things with broad sweeps. Things like eggs should not be demonized. Eggs are naturally high in so many important micronutrients like choline, which for instance is super important for pregnant women and the neurodevelopment of babies, but also in things like calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and vitamin A. They're also great source of protein, and they have that complete amino acid profile that we're really looking for. On top of this, eggs are so readily available. They're cheap, they're affordable. We should definitely not be taking eggs out of our diet. Certainly there's varying degrees of how good certain eggs are for us, but we should just be eating eggs regularly. That doesn't mean go eat a dozen eggs a day necessarily, but don't shy away from the eggs, all right? But will it make you fat? Okay, so again, that's what I keep coming back to this because it's what everyone asks me. Once again, it's yes and no. Dietary fat is in essence, it's energy. We can use energy immediately for muscle fuel. We can use it for working out, or we can just let it be stored in your body. So you still got to be careful, all right? What does this mean for you? Well, like everything else, you mostly just need to stay away from processed fats. I mean, it's pretty simple. When they're highly palatable and highly processed, you're probably going to eat too much. They're probably hard to break down. You're probably not about to go work out right after eating those Oreos. Let's be honest here. So they're probably also going to be increasing your LDL and VLDLs. Okay, so your ratio that your doctor is going to yell at you for, it's going to get worse. So you just need to stay away from foods like that are processed. A little known fact as an aside, Oreos, the knockoff brand, they're called hydros, hydrogenated oils. All right, back then they thought this was, oh, hey, this is better for us. This is great for production too. Let's make these. No, they're really bad for you. So staying away from processed foods is one of the biggest takeaways here. Second, most people are having a bad ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats among the unsaturated fatty acids. We definitely need to get a better ratio. That means a lot less of the pseudo or semi-processed foods and a lot more of like fish, for instance, or other seafoods would be great. Nuts and seeds or nut and seed oils, those would be great. And if it isn't practical to change your diet heavily, supplement. We can get some very good quality fish oils out there. And you don't have to get the ones that make you burp fishy smells, okay? There are better ones out there. So, and diversify your saturated fats. So saturated fats are not bad for you inherently, all right? We just want to stay away from those processed ones. Most people are getting plenty of stearic and palmitic acid in animal products and animals themselves, but maybe they're not getting enough of the lauric acids and the caproic acids, those medium chain triglycerides. So seek out some coconut oil or palm oil once in a while. Doesn't mean you have it every day, but once in a while it can be great and it's really delicious. And then finally, when possible, just eat higher quality foods. Don't eat foods coming from giant factories. Don't eat foods coming in boxes. Don't eat foods coming in bags. Don't go to the fair and order fried Twinkies every day. You know, it's pretty straightforward stuff. If you can do these things and educate yourself about these fats, you're probably going to be a lot healthier as an individual. And the more you try to eat like a normal human being, the healthier you're going to be without even trying. All right. Well, hopefully you guys learned something today about fats. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you everybody and be well.